Welcome to another episode of the House Huddle Podcast. Here are your hosts, Rob Schwartz and Justin Onayemi, two Bears fans who decided talking into a microphone was better than shouting at their television.
Welcome in, House Huddlers. No huddle up.
I know. I was like, I don't want a false start here.
Yep.
No huddling here.
Wanted to see if I could catch you off guard.
Nope.
As always, I'm Rob Schwartz. With me is Justin Onayemi, and we are going to talk Hard Knocks episode 3.
Another good episode. Before we do have a sponsor. Rob, you want to give a little information to the listeners?
Yeah, so if you're looking to bet on the Bears, they played this Thursday, a nice short week. Sounds like most of the starters will not be playing. It was kind of a weird way that it was said. You would think maybe he's talking about Torrey Taylor. I mean, technically he's a starter. Like Cairo Santos, technically he's a starter. But yeah, so they will not be playing. But do you think they're going to take on the Kansas City Chiefs and win? Maybe you want to put some money on it? Well, if you have not signed up for all the sports books in your area, you can jump on to our sign-up page at signupexpert.com/huddle. And then you can access all of the links that are available to you. There's also some daily fantasy sites that will be available, even if you're in areas that do not actually have sports books that are legal. And so you can check those out, see what offers are out there. There's sign-up offers, and support our show at the same time.
That's right. Wonderful. All right, Rob. So with this episode, I just kind of was taking some notes on anything that stood out to me. Should we just kind of go back and forth until we run out of stuff to say?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think the thing we start off with is that practice is harder than the game.
Boom. That was my first note. That's good. Now, did you take that as just because it's practice or because he's going up against the Bears number 1 D?
I took it as you're going through plays, you're learning the playbook, like you're trying to install things that you've never done before. And that part of it is a lot more difficult than actually just going out and playing football. Just
ball out.
Yep.
And you see some of the like instinctive plays that he's able to make, and it's fun,
Yeah.
Not that practice isn't, but I get where he's coming from. I wanted to interpret also something we've been hearing, which is the Bears defense, number 1 especially, might be pretty good. And if you can go against them every single day, yeah, you might make some mistakes or throw a pick here and there, but they're preparing you to face, other defenses that maybe will seem easier in comparison. So it could have also been interpreted that way, although I do think more along the lines of what you were saying is what he meant.
Right.
So then something else that kind of, I think right after that a little bit, is this idea of cocky versus confidence. And something I've been hearing a lot of lately is, and we know this because we follow the Bears as closely as we do, but I've heard multiple players talk about the perception that Williams had during the draft process or even before the draft process versus when they get to meet this dude, it's like night and day. And I think part of that is he's obviously very confident, but like, it's not really cockiness. I mean, and even if it is, I don't know. What's your take?
Well, I think too, Hogan Johns did their annual interview of Ryan Poles. They do that with the general managers going back to Ryan Pace. And it's an excellent interview. If you have not listened to that interview, you need to go find it. The Hogan Johns podcast. It is an unbelievable behind the scenes interview. Ryan Poles is very outgoing, and it gives you another behind the scenes look of what's going on, like we're seeing now on Hard Knocks, right? And I think it was Adam Hogue who said that Cole Kmet at one point on the CHGO podcast, or maybe it was behind the scenes, was talking about how he fell into that like trap of like, oh, this kid, like the way he's acting, all this stuff. And then it's like, once you actually get to meet him and see who he really is, the humbleness comes out, and he's he's cocky. He's not cocky. He's just confident. Like he knows what he wants to do. He knows what he wants to achieve. And I definitely think that Caleb Williams is on that right path. And we're seeing it in this behind the scenes footage too of the games.
I agree with you that was a great interview of Ryan Poles. And something he said after that is it's a reminder to him and his staff that like you have to do your due diligence and talk to the people who know these guys and not fall into the rhetoric or the narrative that's just being put out there or spun.
You know, this isn't a Hard Knocks thing, but like you have to wonder how much of that was other teams trying to feed nonsense out there to try and get him to maybe fall.
I don't think it could have been that much. I mean, how far do you think he would have fallen? If Bears didn't take him at 1, pew!
Right. I mean, I'm saying, like, was it Washington, like, putting that shit out there?
I mean,
was it
that was his hometown, so, yeah, but I don't think it was that. But, yeah, there was a perception out there, and all of these guys are real human beings, which is one of the things that's nice to see on a show like Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
So you see a little bit more of the real people that they are.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning of chronological stuff, I love the fact that they're still building on that Caleb Williams, Matt Eberflus connection. That's where that, the game is, or the practice is harder than the game quote came from. They were reviewing things that took place in that Bills game, right? And just hearing him speak, like, again, I don't want to like throw other quarterbacks under the bus. I'm not going to say Justin Fields. I'm actually going to throw this back to Mitch Trubisky, but there were many times where Mitch Trubisky struggled to explain what was going on at the podium. And you're hearing these conversations take place, and it's like night and day how much he's already understanding this offense.
Random question. We've seen multiple times, I'd say probably each of the 3 episodes so far is Eberflus and Williams is at his desk and they're just talking. Does he have other players in there as well, and we're just not seeing it? Or is this just your QB1, I'm the head coach, we have our certain amount of time allotted to talk?
I'm going to bet that there are certain other players that end up in there, but Hard Knocks is obviously going to focus on what's going to draw ratings.
True. Yeah, I'm just curious. So I got a goofy one, but when he was on another podcast being interviewed, they said if you could hit a button and it would kill one Bears fan, but guarantee 10 Super Bowls, would you do it?
That was the Big Cat, the Big Cat podcast for Barstool Sports, and he was hesitating to answer, but they were ready to just throw themselves on that.
Exactly, and I think that's what made him a little more confident to be like, all right, I'd go ahead and push that button. But I mean, he's probably sitting here thinking, am I stepping into one here if I answer too quickly? So
that's an interesting question, though. I mean, out of all of the Bears fans that are out
there, millions of us out there.
If only one had to die, like, am I willing to sacrifice myself for that?
Multiple Bears fans die each season. So
yeah, again, I have good life insurance. My family would be well taken care of
and happy about Bears titles. So
yes,
but add your name to the list of volunteers. I'm not putting mine on there, but
that's fine. I'll jump on that grenade for you guys. All right.
The Hallis Huddle would carry on. We'd find a way. Either Bob Weiss, maybe Jake Johnson,
maybe
whoever I can get.
Julius Pepperwood.
Can I throw another one since I just gave a goofy one?
Yeah.
All right, and I'll lead it, but then I want to hear your comments. I appreciated how the episode kind of put Bagent in the frame of a veteran, even though he's only in year 2 as coming in as an undrafted rookie. So what was your feelings on that?
Yeah, I thought that was awesome to hear him talk about, how much easier and it is just to know like the schedule of everything as a second-year player. Like, this is an undrafted free agent. I think they said in the episode he's the first one since like the 50s who came out of is it D2 to start as a quarterback in the NFL. Like
uncharted
I understand the hype, right? Like that was going on last season. For those who wanted him to play over Justin Fields, like he came out, he flashed. And I do like what we've seen so far. He struggled in that Bills game if you're going to compare him to like what we saw with Brett Rippon, right? But he put on a show against the Bengals. So I do think he's a very solid backup quarterback. And I love how much he's emphasizing, like, look, I'm not settling. Like I have my own goals. I'm going to push. And just to get that quarterback connection, that see what, that in that quarterback room, I thought was really cool.
And just connections throughout the whole team. We'll come back to that later. But real quick, Ryan Poles does have a connection to Matt Ryan, played together at Boston College. And it was interesting to hear Matt Ryan's take on Bagent. And to your point, people love the backup quarterback and start the controversy.
Especially in Chicago.
But Matt Ryan, I hope I said Matt Ryan, because now there's so many Ryans in my head right now.
You said Matt Ryan.
Okay. But Matt Ryan framed it very well, which is just like, yeah, this guy can come in and hold down the fort until your starter comes back. I mean, that's what he did last season. He started 4 games, went 2-2. That's what you want out of your backup. So I don't want to get it twisted as like quarterback controversy. You love to have a good backup. And then not only do they think they have a good backup, but you have a good backup that was an undrafted free agent. So you got him at a price that nobody else out there could possibly compete with. So great to see the progression he's making. And it was just interesting, though, to see like how much of a difference 1 year can make, because now he's like the wily veteran giving advice and other things to Caleb Williams. So I thought that was kind of cool. What do you got?
So then we got more to look forward to next year when Williams is in that second year, right? Like you would hope that's just if it's that much of an easier transition, just knowing the schedule of things, knowing how things operate, like you have
knowing your way to the stadium,
right? Yeah.
That's an Australian thing, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, he was on the wrong side of the road, right? Like,
what do you got? I got another good one, but I've taken 2. So your turn.
So nicknames. Speaking of the Australian, right? Like we already knew this, that Torrey Taylor did not want to be known as the crocodile punter. He said he didn't want really any Australian connection to his name. So I haven't even put thought into it, but maybe I'll throw you on the spot. Like, can you think of something that like isn't the Australian? Like, as I know in the beginning, like when we first drafted him, we saw that when we saw them first draft him, like we came up with a few names too.
Right.
I think that's going to be our goal is now.
All right. I
can't do
it on the spot, but I just want to point out, like, I feel like nicknames often are about what makes you unique or interesting. And the fact that he's from Australia is a big part of like why he's different. So that was weird. He's like, yep, nothing with Australia.
Yeah.
Seems like he's going to be a great punter though, too. And I like that they kind of talked about that. And they mentioned how he was doing a really good job at holding for the kicking. And I noticed it in the game. Now, I noticed it from the perspective of what's up with all these bad high snaps.
Yeah.
So I don't know who was actually snapping, if that's going to be their regular guy or.
I think Patrick Scales is still out. So it's their backup.
So it's their backup. So hopefully that gets figured out. But he did a good job holding, even though that kind of gets forgotten. And it's funny, as he's coming off the field, the other punter is like, hey, yeah, good hold. You finally get recognized, you know. So one that you kind of maybe missed, or you didn't miss it on the show, but I thought you were going to take it when I gave you one. I liked the inside look at the Matthew Judon almost trade.
Yeah. It kind of reminds you of that New York Giants
exactly
Hard Knocks series, right?
Which, again, citing that interview with Hogan Johns, Ryan Poles was like, "Don't put me on that show. Not on the during the draft one." You know,
he basically said that he doesn't expect any team to volunteer to be on that series, right, of Hard Knocks. So I can understand why.
We brought it up in our last episode, I believe. I can't remember if it was off air or during the episode, but you actually kind of said you were okay with them not getting Matthew Judon. And 100%. It's interesting how the show compared, okay, you give up a third and possibly money for Judon. We gave up a fourth for 4 years of Austin Booker. And which is greater? Austin Booker's balling out. You look at the contract and the money it would cost you and the age and the health and all that. So that was a cool inside look. But what were your thoughts when you saw that pop up on this episode?
So my first thought was, and maybe I'm misremembering what I read, but I think Brad Biggs was now basically conflicted and proved wrong, because if I recall, his whole thing was that they pulled out when he wanted to get an extension. Like they wanted him to play on his existing contract, is what I recall Brad Biggs saying. And he's a guy who's very well connected. So is this a spin for Hard Knocks that we're seeing here and not actual footage that was taking place in the moment? And it's stuff that kind of took place after the fact? Or did Brad Biggs get his source wrong? That to me was very interesting.
I'm not going to speculate on that.
Because to me, I look at it as I wasn't big on it anyway, right? And you do have to look at the Austin Booker situation, right? You got to look at all of these things in the moment. So look, they were fine giving up a 3rd round pick. I don't think that would have been an awful thing to get rid of for a guy like Judon. But as a 1-year rental might be a little bit steep. I know they did the same thing with Keenan Allen for a 4th, but again, a 3rd versus a 4th, a little bit steeper of a price.
A receiver versus an end.
Yeah. A guy coming off of a tricep or a bicep injury, right? Like a torn bicep injury. So is he going to be fully healthy?
But Pohl spoke to that in the episode. He said, hey, it's his bicep. We don't think that, it's not a lower body injury. So we don't think it'll affect him on how he rushes the passer and that kind of thing. So, I mean, but they're doing so much calculus to figure out what moves are worth making and what aren't. And I guess it's nice to see the behind the scenes, because you and I keep saying it, huge Ryan Poles fans. Yeah. It seems like he's willing to take risks, but he's not like willy-nilly just throwing things out there. There's a lot that goes into these decisions.
I am a little nervous to see what happens, though, when Ian Cunningham isn't here to be that like little voice that's, you gotta get like those voices on your shoulder, like the angel and the devil. And it's almost like it's his conscience, like Jiminy Cricket. It's his conscience. Like, Ryan, like, we don't need to make this move. And look, you got Rome Odunze, right? Like, you keep seeing like him kind of like talking sense into him at times.
There's others. It's a team effort over there. And I think when Ian Cunningham moves on, because
he deserves it.
I feel like he deserves it. The next time a team needs a GM, I mean, I think looking at who Chicago's nurturing would be a great idea.
Yeah.
And the Bears would get some compensation. But anyway.
And I wonder if seeing him now too, like you see him a little bit in 1920 football drive, seeing him in the action, like behind the scenes moment, is that going to help drive his stock? Because for the last 2 years, he's been interviewing. Yeah. If I remember correctly, it might've been the Arizona Cardinals job that he was like one of the high profile guys that they were considering. Is it possible that Hard Knocks propels him to get that job now? Obviously, it'll probably come down to how well the Bears play this season.
Absolutely. I mean, it's exposure, but I would imagine, there's only 32 teams out there. I'm hoping they do their homework a little more than like, I was watching HBO and there's this guy named Ian Cunningham. Maybe we should hire him.
They look at everything, and I think that's proof that
it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
It's just added bonus material, right? But we're seeing so much stuff. I mean, even with Ryan Poles, like he talks about his memes on Twitter. Like he's on social media. I mean, people are now speculating, does he have a burner account out there? Like, is he one of these people that we're communicating with on a consistent basis? There's a guy out there like Let Ryan Poles Eat. I can't imagine it's him, but in fact, I don't follow him for a reason. But maybe, somebody out there that's a little bit lower profile.
Hey, Hallis Huddle, man, our subscribers are getting up there. Maybe one of them is Ryan Poles in incognito.
Could be.
So there was one thing that got me way up to the front of my seat. Like I was like, okay, wait a minute now, HBO, are you about to break something here? And then it was lame and it passed real quick. So I think we should only let it pass real quick in this conversation.
Okay.
But the stadium stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't it seem like they were like building it up to like tell us something? And then it was like, should we get high chairs or low chairs?
I mean, look, I've talked about it exhaustively here and at Bear Goggles On. You can find plenty of my articles out there. I haven't written about it since, February-ish. Maybe it was March, April. I don't know. Sometime in the spring. But I keep telling everyone, look, here's the situation. It's Illinois versus Illinois because it doesn't really matter. If they're not getting state funding, I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. This thing's probably going to play out, and they're going to run out their whole entire lease till 2032.
So did the HBO little quick part they show just basically imply exactly where the stadium is now? They would build some awesome dome, or was that supposed to be some other location?
I'll have to go back and rewatch that part.
Yeah,
more
that was
carefully.
unclear to me, but
Okay. Yeah,
anyway.
I didn't pick up enough of it to like get a full, like you said, they kind of like built it up and then just kind of whoop.
Yeah, it was quick. So, what do you got?
I guess we should go talk about the game real quick, right? Like we got
no.
There's
You got one more
something
thing.
first. Okay.
There's one more thing.
All right.
And thank you, HBO, because remember, Rob, I turned into fire and you had to be ice.
That's right.
Simone Biles, they called her out again and said, "What are you doing wearing a Green Bay Packers jacket on an 80-degree day in Chicago?"
It's very funny and disappointing. It's funny and disappointing at the same time. It's funny that you brought it up. It's disappointing that I forgot because I literally put it in the description of our show.
Oh, did you?
It was the first part specifically about this episode that I talked about was Simone Biles.
Thank you.
In a Packers jacket, and I completely spaced about it now.
And I feel like she took it off at some point or something because they kind of showed her and it wasn't there. But that's got to stop. That can't happen again. And I know I sound like a meatball, but that can't happen again.
No. You sound like a Chicago Bears fan. It is the biggest rivalry in football, in my opinion. I don't think of any other teams the way that I think of the Bears versus the Packers. And I know it's because I'm a Bears fan, but I think even if I was a different football fan, like a different team, I still think I would look at it that way because this rivalry goes all the way back to the beginning of the league.
That's what I was just about to say is, yes, it's heightened for us because we're Bears fans, but the league even hypes that one up more than others because of how long that history goes. Yeah. Now, granted, maybe that's died down a little bit because the Bears have just sucked so bad in the rivalry.
100%. But the Packers went through that same thing in the earlier years too. So I think it's just recency bias,
Recency bias, yes, but it also is a different time and a different era. I mean, look how fast things are out there on social media and things like that. And when the rivalry is so one-sided, other ones pick up, But now, I think nationally, go ahead.
People our age, I think, forget that the Packers weren't good before they had Brett Favre. Agreed. Right? Like they were not good. And the Bears were not great, but at least they were one of the better teams in the early 90s and the, obviously mid to late 80s.
I actually remember, I'm aging myself here, but I remember it must have been late 80s, which is shocking I would remember, but maybe it was early 90s. It was pre-Favre, and the Packers won a game against the Bears. I think Don Majkowski, they used to call him I don't know. He threw a pass for a touchdown to beat the Bears, but he crossed the line of scrimmage, and it wasn't called, and it was pre-replay, and it was one of the plays that made people say, no, we need instant replay, blah, 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 blah. So comments, anyone, if you remember this play or even the player, go ahead and put a comment or something because maybe I'm just making up a complete memory. I don't know.
Real quick, we love comments. The comments are awesome. I try to respond within 24 hours. And if you are watching us for the first time, because I know we got a lot of views on our first episode recap of Hard Knocks, hit that subscribe button. We didn't talk about this. Hit that subscribe button. You will be automatically entered into a free giveaway for a Bears jersey of your choice, any player that is available. And we will, because we're not going to do custom ones, and we will get that shipped out to you. We will do a drawing, and we're just trying to get to 750 subscribers. Not even trying to get to that 1,000 mark.
Nope.
We are almost 100 away. So
Rob, I didn't run this by you, but if Simone Biles subscribes and wins, we'll even get her a Packers jersey.
I will not do that. I will buy her a jersey and a new Chicago Bears Jonathan Owens custom-made coat.
There we go. So we do episodes when games happen, and we already broke down the Cincinnati game that they kind of featured in this episode.
Yeah, not a lot to talk about.
No, but I just want to point something out. We had talked about how obviously those first 3 drives were all 3 and outs. The first one in particular was bad throw to Keenan Allen, and then that intentional grounding, which thank goodness gave Torrey Taylor enough room to boom a punt. But we said, hey, was it home field jitters? Now on the episode, I don't know. I think it was the quarterback coach, Kerry Joseph. And he asked Williams, he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are you? Do you remember his answer, Rob?
I don't, off the top of my head.
0. On a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are you? He said 0. I don't get nervous.
I remember him talking about the last time he was nervous was when he was in high school and he fumbled.
Exactly. And he said, I had And he said I had 2 fumbled snaps. And I was thinking, damn, Fields must have been nervous in that preseason game with the Steelers. But that's kind of cool to hear. You hope that the play backs it up. And I don't know how many NFL players, if you give them truth serum, what their answers would be on that. I mean, and is he talking never ever? Or if you're in a title game, all of a sudden there's a little nerves there. I don't know. And I don't even know how Mahomes would answer that question or anyone else for that matter.
I actually thought you were going to lead into the helmet issue.
Take it away.
Kind of falls in line with that too, right?
That's true.
We saw him having issues with his helmet, couldn't hear the plays.
If we want to get into the excuse making business.
Yeah, no, of course not. But I mean, it does make a difference, right? I mean, you get to hear that coach all the way up until basically the ball snapped.
Yeah. I mean, you never know with editing and things like that, but they truly made it look like new helmet. I'm a new man and I'm going to ball out now. So I hope it wasn't as simple as I can't hear Shane Waldron. So now our offense looks like complete crap.
No, I'll be honest. If it wasn't fixed after the first drive, that's a problem.
I don't know if it was happening the first drive.
I see what you're saying.
Remember, the first drive was like 15 seconds.
Right.
To be honest,
because it's usually scripted anyway.
Incomplete stop clock.
Yeah, and it's usually a scripted thing anyway. So
yeah, and they ran. I think the second play was a play they ran the week prior, so certainly was scripted.
Definitely was.
I think maybe in drive 2 or drive 3 is when they kind of showed it happening, and he addressed it and came back. So, and then I got one more, Rob. I actually have a few more, but I got one, and we can maybe.
I don't have anything else. So you just want to quick hit them.
So this is just global. I just feel like I want to say what I feel, but I want to also hear what you think. But Eberflus is really coming off as like, I think, a quality coach. His record would not show that.
No.
And your record does have to do with the talent or lack of talent you may have. Not to mention, when he took this job, he was a first-time head coach. It's not like he's been through this before. I mean, even Belichick, you look at what he did in New England, he had already been a coach in Cleveland where it didn't go so well.
Right.
But when coming into this offseason, you and I both were debating on if Eberflus should even still have this job, especially knowing you were going to bring in a guy we thought was going to be Caleb Williams or some rookie to take this franchise into a new direction. So it was a big deal that Ryan Poles said, no, I like what Eberflus is doing in establishing culture and things like that. And whether you look at how Hard Knocks is going, whether you look at just the eye test, whether you listen to the interview with Poles, this team does seem to have a very positive, strong culture. Lots of leaders. I like the way this thing is coming together. Now, if they go 6-11 this year, I won't be able to say what I just said and feel good about it. But I also don't think that's going to happen. So, whether it's what Hard Knocks has shown or just your own feelings, what are your thoughts with Eberflus?
Yeah, so new haircut, new beard, new coach. I mean, and maybe it's because we didn't get to see the behind-the-scenes stuff, but I remember watching him, and he wasn't focused as much because he was defensive coordinator, but I remember seeing him on the Indianapolis Colts version of Hard Knocks. And it was, I don't know, just a little bit different than he is now. I think he's learning. I think he's learning how to handle the team as a whole versus just, one unit. I think he's doing a good job of allowing his assistant coaches to coach. I think we're seeing that, especially with Eric Washington, right? And again, going back to the whole him working with Caleb Williams thing, that to me was never a thing that I would even have thought would have been happening. To me, it was always oh, well, Shane Waldron's going to be the guy to coach him up, right? But we're seeing it from all sides, and I think that's great. I think that's the way that you're going to help develop a quarterback. I think the way that Caleb Williams is, his development will be from an average quarterback to hopefully an elite quarterback. That was our concern. Was he going to be the guy to help get him over that hump? I was very nervous about it. He's definitely changed my mind a little bit, but I'm still going to leave out. I still have reservations just to see how the season goes.
I mean, truth be told, probably the number of coaches that a team wins significantly more games than they would have with, replacement level coach is probably only 3 or 4 in the whole league. I mean, I think why am I drawing a blank on Andy Reid?
Yeah.
Andy Reid is an example of and he's done it not just in Kansas City, but also in Philly. But he's the type of coach where it's I think he's actually part of the recipe of why this team is successful.
Yeah.
Maybe Tomlin is another one I would throw in there. And certainly I'm not putting Eberflus in that category, but it just tantalizing to think, what if Chicago has a guy like that in Eberflus, where he just automatically kind of players want to play for him. He can keep morale up even when things aren't going well. And schematically, I mean, as a defensive-minded guy, he seems to really know what he's doing. Like when he took over the play calling, we saw a difference in what that meant, and it didn't necessarily take away from his CEO-like job of being the head coach. So again, I'm not putting him in the Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin category, but those guys got to that point at some point, and it helps to have talent on your team. So, I mean, it goes hand in hand, but could this be the beginning of him kind of being that centerpiece? Hopefully.
Here's the thing. We talked about this already before. Like when we gave Justin Fields that cushion from that first year because they went 3-13, 3-14.
3-14.
And 17 games.
Well, I think that was the first year maybe of 17.
Maybe.
I don't remember.
No, it was the second, right? Because in 2020, they squeaked their way in, right? To the playoffs.
I already used the Men in Black zapper. I don't even know who Justin Fields is. I'm sorry, but you
just rewrote history, right? Like you got to be like Will Smith and make it interesting, and not Tommy Lee Jones and just make it awful.
Right.
But yeah, so it was, again, we gave him that, I wouldn't say excuse, but the
benefit of the doubt.
They tore that team down, right? That was his first year coaching too. So you kind of have to pad that a little bit as well for him. He's going into year 3. I mean, most coaches get at least 4 seasons before they're canned. Or you're in a bad organization where you're getting rid of a coach every 1 to 2 years, right? So you need that continuity. You need that chemistry. This is the year. He's got to prove it. Even like you said, if they go only 6 wins, he's probably pushing out the door, but I don't know, because then you're resetting everything again.
I mean, it also depends on how that looks, but
I think he's got at least
I just threw that number out there.
I think he's got at least 2 years unless this thing just implodes.
And I'm more saying, hey, maybe he's your coach for the next 10.
And exactly. Could he be the next Lovie Smith?
That be,
I know that they didn't win anything with Lovie Smith, but they were consistent in those seasons. The chemistry of that team. Another thing that was talked about in the Adam John's podcast.
Exactly.
I think there's definitely something being built here, and it's just a matter of, can they keep building it and not let anything collapse when guys go out the door?
And it's interesting too, to be able to have what seems like a positive chemistry when you aren't winning.
Yes.
I think actually does speak volumes. Now, again, not winning eventually does just say, bring that kind of stuff down and, leads to infighting, I'm sure. But imagine what winning can do when you already have that positive culture. And so I'm intrigued. I mean, it's a huge year for the Bears. It's a huge year for Eberflus. It's a huge year for Caleb Williams, although it is his rookie year, so we need to keep that in mind. But exciting time to be a Bears fan. Perfect time to end up on Hard Knocks. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to watch Hard Knocks 2 years ago when it was the Bears. I still would have, and I would have been into it.
Right.
But it wouldn't have been perfection. And that's just what this feels like. So,
yeah.
All right. That's all I got, man. I mean, this is an exciting time to be a Bears fan.
I think you had one more thing. You mentioned it in the pre-show.
How
did the show end?
So, different times they end practice or games. They call a guy up to kind of lead the team in a little closing few words. And Caleb Williams, who continues to impress with his maturity and all those things, he had a saying that I wrote down here: through thick and thin, Bears win. So let's hope that's the case this year, because through thick and thin last year, they were pretty crappy. They kept snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, if you get my drift. But hopefully this is a new direction. So
yeah, definitely. So Road Z here. Thank you for our comment here. Yeah, got a solid team this year. I said y'all, so I'm assuming you actually cheer on a different team. Perfect year for Hard Knocks, but that is definitely the case here, right? Like Justin said, if this was 2 years ago, I don't think that the hype would have been as good. I do think 2022 could have been as fun because we were hoping Justin Fields had that jump. But having Caleb, who's honestly a much better like character personality, I think, than Justin Fields, like would be, I mean, better for the show at least, right?
Yeah.
And then you got Rome, like, yeah, I just think he, perfectly said, like this team right now, this is the perfect year for it. George McCaskey, like you're getting away with it right now because now you're not guaranteed, like you're not forced to be in it for many, many years after this.
Yeah. It looked like it was by design. Like they were waiting for the perfect moment when really they wanted no part of it. So
yeah, well,
and lucked into the perfect moment.
Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets last year guaranteed them not to be on last year. So
that's right. All right, Rob. Great job.
Yeah, bear down.
Claws up.
Claws up.